Yo, 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 happy Tuesday. Welcome back to Go FUD Yourself. It is episode 5 today. Super exciting. I lied to you guys last week, so just going to come clean on that one. I said we were going to do a stream Monday. Completely forgot that Monday was a holiday. I was ready to do it. Kiara was like, nope, fuck that. We're not doing streams on a holiday. Kiara, how you doing?
I'm great. It seemed like it was a holiday in many parts of the world because Carnival started yesterday. Canada had Family Day. America had President's Day.
Yeah,
Portugal
it's a big deal.
did Carnival. Argentina had a day off. It seems like the whole world is like, you know what? This Monday, it's too much.
I found out Carnival in Brazil is actually just one day. And just like it's actually Wednesday, apparently. But over the years, they started, preparing earlier and earlier. And now it's like almost a week in advance and, almost 4 or 5 days after it too, that everybody just keeps partying. It's just an excuse to get out of control. But if you looked at some of the videos, like it looks pretty insane. Like it's the first like full on Carnival since COVID, right? So everybody's just itching to go crazy. Anyways, we don't need to spend a whole ton of time on that today. What we are talking about though is crypto gaming. And we have some headlines, and it's been something that's picking up kind of narrative and steam in the last little bit. So I'll let you maybe introduce Kiara.
Yeah, I'll kick it off. Just this morning, DApp Radar got picked up by Cointelegraph as saying that gamers made up nearly half of all blockchain activity in January 2023. So they say that actually half of all DApp activity was 48% blockchain games.
Yeah, and I mean, if you just look at each of the blockchains in and of themselves, like you can look at the amount of transaction volume that comes from these games, and it's significant. Like, I mean, I remember when Krabata, this is on Avalanche. I remember when Krabata and DFK went to subnets. DFK went directly to a subnet, but Krabata was on the C chain at first, and it was like completely crushing the efficiency of the network until it went on a subnet. Yeah. But that just goes to show that these gaming projects, there's a lot of transactions. They do accrue, at least theoretically, quite a bit of value via the volume of transactions and just the amount of users that people are bringing on. But it's really interesting, I think, looking at kind of how the economics of game design and how that's evolved over the last little bit. I mean, there was kind of the dual and tri-token models that went on forever. As we've seen now, kind of watching what happened to some of those structures, it's not necessarily sustainable. You're paying yield without some way to, feed that yield back into the system in the end. So effectively, it's just a bit of a race to the bottom. We're not going to pick on any particular projects. I mean, I think everybody can look at some of the larger gaming projects that have happened in the last little bit and see, opportunities for change, I guess.
I like the concept of games being able to be built on these subnets where a token kind of already exists that you can borrow or piggyback off of, where like gas is already clear. You have this subset of people who are going to come play the game, right? If something's on an Avalanche subnet, you've got all of these AVAX bullish people coming on over. But it can be really limiting in that way as well, right?
Yeah, in some ways. I mean, the idea of app chains, the reason that there's so much gaming focus on Avalanche is it adds another dimension of optionality. So in fact, you don't actually need to use AVAX as gas on an Avalanche subnet or a Cosmos zone or most other blockchains, many other blockchains, if you create separate networks on top of their layer one. I mean, you can use your own token for gas, and that in and of itself creates some implied value accrual for transaction volume and fees and so on that can start to offset some of the emissions and some of the costs of acquiring users and keeping users, obviously. And so I think it's a really interesting medium. I mean, gaming in general, and we probably don't have stats to back this up. I should say that you might. But gaming in general, it has proliferated globally as technology has become more and more advanced, right? And it's funny because some of the most popular games now are not the most technologically advanced games, which is interesting, especially for Web3 gaming. And maybe we'll come back to that in a couple of minutes. But Gaming in general is a global phenomenon, especially kind of your, Gen Z, maybe millennials a little bit. There's exceptions to this, but kind of your Gen Z group, my kids, are like born with a controller in their hands, damn near. And it's just one of those things that has just become a part of society. And so,
not to be too anthro about it, but gaming has
Yeah.
always been important to humans, right?
Absolutely.
I'm not an anthro major. I'm not going to jump in on that, but I feel like we should be clear that just kind of the style of gaming has changed, and also we are building that into the constructs that we have. When I was working in post-secondary, we had to gamify everything in the classroom. It like became a requirement.
Yeah, and I mean that kind of makes sense, right? Like human nature, that one of the most innate drives is to win, is to compete. Well, really, like that's something that is, kind of built into our DNA, so to speak. And so when you provide venues for that are fun and engaging, and over time, I guess the argument and why so many more people are spending so much more time on games is, in my opinion, is just access. I mean, you can access an ongoing game 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with people all over the world. You don't have to wait until Sunday at 3 to play Dungeons and Dragons with your 3 best friends. You can be like, hey, I'm bored. It's a blessing and a curse, right? This 24/7 accessibility can also be a problem for people that get, beyond engaged in their games or addicted to the games. But
isn't that?
Go ahead.
Can you tell us a little bit about Axie Infinity and Krabata and their glow up? Because I feel like that's really pertinent to the idea of that unlimited access.
Yeah, I just said I didn't want to pick on anybody, but I mean, it's not that either of them have blown up per se. I think just the expectation of the theoretical economic model versus the reality and the practical application, I think just gave different results. Right?
Oh, I said blow up. I was thinking that they got a whole new realm of demographic joining them.
Oh, they did. Absolutely. They did absolutely. But the problem with both of those platforms is maybe not the only problem, but it's also an opportunity. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that they're fucking doomed. Obviously, they're the teams of both are phenomenal. And if anybody can pull off reimagining their own game and how to make it viable, I think it's both of those groups. But I mean, they brought a lot of people into the space, right? The example of Axie, the Philippines and other areas of Southeast Asia where they really proliferated quickly during COVID. It's a bit of a perfect storm. COVID happened, a lot of people out of work, a lot of people trying to figure out how to make ends meet from home. But I mean, short of getting remote work, what else could people do? And Axie, you could see, this was a couple of years ago now, but they had produced some reports or some graphs, I guess, or some maps that showed kind of clusters. So what would happen is in all these little rural towns that had really no industry when COVID happened, all of a sudden you'd see like one day there would be like one person in this little town. By the end of the week, the whole freaking town was now signing up. And then the barrier to entry for Axie, as it creeped up because of more and more demand, then you had all of these guilds and different things that were splitting revenue with people playing the games and all of these other things. And it created these like really complex and really interesting economies around this. And it created opportunity for people to earn a meaningful living wage from their home countries. And for many people that, a lot of people don't want to leave their home countries to try to go to, Canada or Europe or the US. They only do because, in their lifetime, they feel that they may not have the same opportunity. This type of thing, believe it or not, people getting paid to have fun. This type of thing really opens up a whole new dimension of options for people. I mean, esports is a big thing too. Like there's professional versions of it. People making crazy money. Like they fill stadiums with people going to watch these gaming competitions. Like it's kind of crazy. You look at Twitch. I mean, the amount of people that meaningfully follow gaming has exploded. And so for that reason, I think we can't sleep on gaming coming to Web3 and coming to the blockchain, I think people were maybe a little bit, the expectations were misaligned slightly, because I think what everybody expected for some reason was that AAA gaming studios were going to build the whole game somehow, and your game engine and all this other stuff was going to live on the blockchain, which is like, I suppose anything is possible, but it's incredibly impractical, especially now where we're at in the evolution of the tech. And so I think people were disappointed at first, like, oh, so the only thing that's actually enabled by Web3 is like purchasing, transferring, owning assets, maybe. Yeah, for the first few iterations, that's it. And that in and of itself is huge, right? And there's some second order impacts. You asked about Axie in Southeast Asia, and Krabata is a similar example in Southeast Asia and many other places, of course. But I think it's just it's a meaningful means of access, and I think that's really all that that matters. You know, there's a lot less friction for a lot of these individuals to come on Web3, and many of them are unbanked, right? Like a lot of these people don't even have banks, and otherwise wouldn't learn what digital assets are. But if all of a sudden you're getting paid in some token, you have to learn what Web3 is all about. What are you going to do with the token? How do you turn that into fiat if that's what you need? How do you start using your crypto as a currency? One of the weird byproducts in the Philippines was the Axie tokens became meaningful accepted currency at lots of retailers in the Philippines, which is crazy and amazing. You know, and it just goes to show, I think, there's a huge market for this. The barrier to entry is low, relatively low, and you can maintain that. All we really need to do as a space is figure out the economic structure so that it's not infinitely unprofitable, and it'll be crazy. And so, like, I'm not surprised to see the stat that you put up earlier that said, you know,
48% of all DApp activity in January is gaming.
Like it's insane.
It's the blockchain finance revolution when you see something like Axie being accepted at retailers, right? That's us actually seeing how DeFi can have real world utility.
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, really, and of course, there's like the regulatory concerns, and there's all this other nonsense that you have to like. We really don't. Yeah, go find yourself. we'll deal with that on FU Fridays. But I mean, there's some real considerations there, right? Like, is there a form of chance in the games? If that's the case, is it gambling? How does each jurisdiction look at this? It's no different than DeFi or any other, you know, a vertical, I suppose, inside of Web3. Something definitely worth looking at, but you know, there's tons of opportunity. Like it's a huge blue ocean right now. We're seeing, of course, a lot of, you know, fairly big brands. One of the largest, or a version of Twitch. I can't remember what it's called, but it's from India. I saw it just today. Is just raised like a pile of money and is launching an Avalanche subnet, and bringing 50 million active users onto Avalanche. Wow. Like, which is kind of crazy.
Speaking of 50 million active users on an unprecedented spot, did you see that Square Enix decided to switch to Polygon from ETH?
Sorry?
So the people who made Final Fantasy, Square Enix, they in November said that they were going to launch their NFT game called Symbiogenesis, and it would likely be on ETH, because where else would it be? And after some research, they decided to launch it on Polygon. They just announced it, I think, last week. Pretty exciting, I think.
Yeah, I mean, launching a game on ETH currently is a challenge for a host of reasons. I mean, there's amazing aspects of ETH, but some of the challenges, the cost, right? If you're doing simple and small transactions, having gas that costs more than the value of the transaction in that case could be somewhat prohibitive, of course. I think you'll find that there's a lot of opportunity for custom virtual machines or unique virtual machines, coding languages, et cetera, that will serve gaming significantly better than EVM, Ethereum virtual machine, which is, you know, many blockchains we've created EVMs everywhere, it feels like, for composability purposes. But from a gaming perspective, there may be much better languages. Polygon has also been, I mean, you got to give them credit. They've been hammering out partnerships, which is great to see. It was unfortunate to see they laid off 20% of their staff today, which kind of sucks. Or recently, anyways, I saw the announcement today, which kind of sucks. But I mean, they're making moves. They're attracting large brands and large names. Not sure how or what they're providing for encouragement, but you get to a certain critical mass, and Polygon is also a very viable competitor for a gaming ecosystem.
Well, what I find really interesting about this is somebody huge like Square Enix is entering, and obviously they've hired some sort of blockchain team. They're trying to make these decisions, but it seems like in November, and I mean this is totally conjecture. In November, they're like, we should launch a blockchain game. Let's do it on ETH. My cousin said ETH is great, and now that they're building that out, they see the complications and what else they should be doing. And I'm surprised to see a company of that size launching something unique instead of acquiring first. So
Sure.
We have Revenant on Metis, we have DFK on Avalanche, we have all of these other companies that they could be working really closely with to sort of get that better understanding of Web3 gaming and what it means to crypto natives. But then if we think about onboarding and bridging Web 2 to Web 3, this is a huge win.
Well, I think that's a strategic move, right? So part of me that's slightly cynical wants to say that they probably knew already they weren't going to launch on ETH, but if you want to capture the attention of the most loyal crypto bros, best way to do it is to signal that you're going to launch something on ETH, because all of your maxis who have made a lot of money in the space live on ETH and are really focused on proliferating Ethereum. And I mean, ETH will be here for in my opinion forever. Like, ETH is not going to go away as one of the most important, if not the most important, smart contract chains. Totally believe that, but that could have been a strategic move, I think, on their behalf to just get some people interested, possibly. You raised a good point, actually, about them entering the space themselves as opposed to acquiring. And so I've had a philosophy, especially on the finance side of blockchain, that it's quite unlikely to see major finance institutions just coming out with their own product without acquiring somebody or M&A roll-ups, whatever the structure is. But I mean, I guess we are seeing it. Gaming is a little bit different in the sense that most gaming publishers have a very specific style, very specific brands that are underneath their umbrella. And in that event, it might be hard unless you're buying you're buying a game or a platform that has a very similar structure. But it's exciting nonetheless, like to see
if I can, just on M&A, on mergers and acquisitions, I have a literal list. I don't remember them all offhand, but I have a literal list of acquisitions and mergers in gaming from September or for all of 2022. So Animoca Brands acquired We Play Media, Tiny Tap Limited, and Grace Monkey Games. Mythical Games acquired Polystream. Always Geeky Games launched Season O after acquiring Voxy Tactic. I've got 40, I think, here.
There's also a lot of investment in gaming right now. I mean, there's certain venture capital firms that are super focused on gaming. I mean, our friends at Delphi Digital, they have a very strong thesis. They release research reports very frequently on gaming. And I mean, there's a lot of money coming into it. There's a lot of eyeballs. It makes sense that 50 million, 100 million, multiple hundreds of millions of users globally that are part of all these gaming ecosystems could contribute to transaction volume, value accrual, et cetera, on the blockchain, while at the same time benefiting from the innovations on the blockchain, the security, the access to global markets, the many other versions of how they can earn and become better off as a consequence. So I think it's great. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but seeing a lot of these games come in and try to figure out, do we build an app chain? Does that make sense? Are we just going to put enable a small piece of our game with Web3, but call it a Web3 game because it's a hot narrative at the moment? All of this stuff definitely worth looking at. But I mean, yeah, I tend to agree with the sentiment that it's probably going to be one of the major contributors to new user onboarding. I mean, and I've kind of said this, and it's a bit of an unpopular opinion. Maybe not unpopular, but not everybody shares it. That, I mean, although we saw what felt like a lot of growth in the crypto industry in the last cycle in particular, as evidenced by a whole bunch of like Twitter activity and social media activity and all these new people talking about it. The vast majority of that was NFTs and younger people. The vast majority of the actual value accrual in Web3, the vast majority of it was made by incumbents, was made by people that have been playing in this space for a while. Obviously, there's some new entrants every cycle, but what we didn't see is a major influx of new people into the space. It felt like it because there was, more activity, more people talking about things, but the actual value that accumulated stayed pretty closely in lockstep with the appreciation in prices. It's not like a ton of new money. Now, don't get me wrong. There's obviously exceptions. Obviously, new money came in, but I just don't think it was as profound as we all wanted to think it was. And I suspect, again, until we have a major influx of new users, the space will not reach the next level of meaningful adoption and growth. And so here we are. Gaming's the answer.
I want to talk about something else gaming wise a little bit. That's in that influx of new users. So we're talking about gaming, crypto gaming, blockchain gaming, as though it's pretty much esports, right? You're going to have play to earn. You're going to have some partnerships. You're going to have the makers of Final Fantasy come in with the game. We have our favorite games on our subnets. What does that all look like? But I think that we'll see a really big bridge when we get mega corporations having their utility versions of games on the blockchain. And they probably will be like a centralized, like a SEX kind of exchange wallet, so that people in Web 2 aren't aware that they are even participating in blockchain information. A really great example is like Cineplex. Did you ever play the stupid Cineplex games before the trailers?
For people that don't know, Cineplex is a national movie chain in Canada. You wouldn't know that most likely if you lived in America, but or anywhere else. But yeah, no, they used to have little games and so on.
Yeah. So they had these games. If you showed up way too early for your movie, which I did not do, but I used to movie hop, so I would go in and play all the games. So if you showed up way too early, even before the trailers, you could download an app, and it had a fully separate login from your purchase for you to play kind of like trivia games about movies and that kind of thing. And I've seen that at other chains and what have you in American stuff too. I'm sure it's not unique. But the idea was that you had to create this particular specific user ID, and you had a wallet within that user ID where you would win tokens, and then you could have those tokens, and you could either turn them into points with Cineplex or with whatever your movie theater was, or you could buy stuff in app, and they had their own kind of marketplace and what have you. Something like that is already basically using tokenomics, but just wasn't on chain.
Yeah.
So as soon as they change to on chain, and they don't make people remember their own seed phrase, and you can log in with your Web2 email address, you don't know, you're unaware that you've transitioned. But what's interesting about that is that those types of simple games, these games that are like utility based, convenience based, something that's on your mobile, that's what we'll actually see people transitioning into this space and not being aware. Whereas people having to like play a Final Fantasy game on blockchain, they're going to be very aware that that's what's happening, right?
That's the thing, yeah. I think that's probably a focus, not just in gaming, but for the space as a whole. I mean, the user experience of blockchain, admittedly, like this is almost cliche to say now, because I don't think there's a single person in the space that doesn't believe that, one of the next major inflection points is user experience for blockchain. Yeah. And, we're seeing that with a lot of new wallet technologies coming out. There's a lot of competitors to, the OG MetaMask, et cetera, that are providing a really good competitive landscape for both MetaMask to evolve and, for the remaining providers in the space. And I think you're going to find kind of a continuum, I suppose, in terms of, fully centralized wallet support via, some centralized entity that keeps your keys for you. And if you get locked out, it's actually quite similar to what, you forgot your password on your email or something, you have to send photos of yourself and some other nonsense. All all the way down to like pure self-custody, cold storage wallets, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that continuum, as long as there's spots all the way along it for different people with different providers, you'll find something that's comfortable. But the more we can obfuscate the complexity without hiding things, of course, one of the major value adds of blockchain is transparency. But as long as we can obfuscate some of the complexity of transacting away from the user, that's a huge value add. I think Web3 gaming, of course, is going to have that as a primary driver.
At some point, when you like the privacy checkbox and the newsletter checkbox and the blockchain information choose to read, and people who aren't interested.
Your internet connection is horrendous all of a sudden. So I'm pretty sure I have no idea what you said. You said something cool, whatever
That's
it is.
Fine. Before we go, I have one more set.
Okay, let's do it. What? One more. Oh, 104 billion. Yeah. I mean, the market size, that's probably on the low side of a lot of expectations. But even then, that's 100 billion in revenue. We've done some internal, research on some of this just to look at how much revenue from Web2 gaming comes from mobile versus desktop, how much comes from super sophisticated games versus, something like Roblox, which is actually quite sophisticated. It's an incredible platform model, which we don't have time for today, but really interesting concepts. And I think, that the total addressable market is huge for this. It's, again, I mean, the thing about gaming, we talked about this at the beginning, think about gaming that has allowed it to proliferate is ease of access. You buy a console, which is a barrier to entry, or you have a computer in the traditional gaming world, or you have a phone, and you can just download some shit and start playing. Like, there's not a whole lot, like my kids, even my 4-year-old, figures out how to play games as fast or faster than I would at this point, because that's just how they're conditioned. Web3 gaming can be no different. In order for us to see meaningful adoption and for us to start, us as a space to start taking some of that addressable market as our own, it's the ease of access is going to be key. Any final thoughts?
I just want to plug really quick that DFK has a new feature coming out this week.
Oh, yeah.
And it features Roam terminal stats. So I'm pretty excited too about the idea of how you can go beyond game with blockchain gaming, right? When you played World of Warcraft, when you play Dungeons and Dragons, whether it's online, Magic the Gathering online, that kind of stuff, you have the community, you have the game, but what else can you kind of do that is bolstering your financial portfolio at the same time? What other types of analytics can you make? So on and so forth. I think DFK is maybe leading in that right now, which is kind of cool. Just my own personal conjecture again, but
I think, the DFK team is really, they're great friends of ours, of course, but we have a deep partnership with RBL and DeFi Kingdoms, and also some strong relationship via Benki and DeFi Kingdoms. But I think, again, exactly to your point, DeFi Kingdoms at the very foundation of it is a DEX. It's just a decentralized exchange. But then they built all of this gamification and all of this kind of role-playing, yield generating. Instead of just getting your emissions the way that you normally would on DeFi protocols, you have to go and forage and mine and fish and do all these different things in DeFi Kingdoms. And it's actually amazing. And so, but a lot of the value accrual then for the DeFi Kingdoms game is actually built on meaningful value, right? Like, there's actually fees, there's actually revenue going into the system that then helps with the emissions and whatever they're paying out to the users. And so, to your point, I think it creates a just uncharted territory in terms of like how gaming entities can think about economics. Like, there's so many more dimensions of how you can build game economics now, other than, get a credit card charge a monthly fee, give them some coins or some nonsense that they can use every month to buy some shit. I think there's a lot of other ways to do that now, where in fact the users maybe aren't paying anything per month from a subscription perspective, but rather it's the second and third order activities that create revenue for the platform. I think it is really, really interesting. I think DeFi Kingdoms guys and gals were onto this a long time ago, and there's many other platforms, of course, but I do love the shout out to DeFi Kingdoms. Anyways,
that's crypto gaming in a nutshell.
Crypto gaming, our opinions today. Go FUD yourself. Thank you all for checking it out. We'll see you tomorrow, 12:30 Eastern. Same
Go FUD
place.
yourself, sweetie.